welcome to GameMaker2. So I'm going to show you some basics and I will lead you through with about 5 tutorials, video tutorials that I will record and have made available to you. When you log into GameMaker, you might have to add in your password each time, even if you click the Remember Me button, and please do that. I do advise it. I'm going to just change over to my other screen now so you can follow along with what I'm doing. So here I've started GameMaker. Whenever you start GameMaker and a new game, you obviously click the new button. So we'll do that. Now we're not using GameMaker language. Later on, if you become more advanced, you might like to use that in future years, but not this year. You won't get any better game doing that method yet. So we'll have a look at drag and drop. It's the best place to start. When you click on drag and drop, it will ask you to make a name for your game. So we'll call it Shoot Game 1, and I save that, and it should open up then my GameMaker window. Now in your GameMaker window, you can see here you have fairly much an empty workspace. So in order to see something, the first thing that I would usually do is to click on the room so that you can see the room. So you can see a room here, and up here you've got an instances button which you use when you're programming things in the room, and you've got a background button. When we've got the background button shown here, you can actually add a background by using a sprite, or you can change the color. In this case, I'll simply change the color of the background, and I'll just use a bluish color. I don't want it to be too bright, so I'll make it kind of a hazy blue. I could store the color there, and I'll just go OK. So there's my room background. Now, I won't do anything more with that at the moment, but I will save what I've done. So now you've got your room. The next thing you need to understand in terms of resources, and these are all our game resources here, there are lots of elements here. The first thing that's important to understand are sprites. Now, sprites are images that you bring into your game, really small images, very tiny images really. And you can see here that the width of our room, by the way, down here is 1024 and 768 pixels. That's a fairly good size to have on your computer screen. So I won't change those, but you could change them at any stage. That's up to you. Create a sprite from an image that I've already got. As I said, you import your images. So you create sprite from images. And I can go over here where I've stored up my resources. These are available for you to download. There's a zip file of these, and I've got some sprites in here. I'm going into the various things. I just want a ball. I could use a hamburger, but you could collect hamburgers in a game if you wanted to, but let's just use a ball for the moment. So you can see here that I have the image here blown up, and it is a sprite. Now, when you have a sprite can never be used in a game unless you make it into an object first. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. I'm going to create an object, and I'm going to create the object here, and that object is called object naught, but I'm going to call it ball 1. And because it's called ball 1, I need to select my sprite. So I click down here on that arrow, and I've got one sprite there I can select from, which is the ball. And it says there now that I have a sprite called ball1. Oh, sorry, an object called ball1 based on the sprite that I bought in, and that sprite is called Sprite0. Probably be useful to change that to the name ball as well, but we won't worry about that. You can also make a sprite, and that's what I'm next going to do. I'm just going to create a sprite here now, and in this case you will draw your own sprite, and the first video tutorial runs through this for you. But essentially what you're doing here is simply drawing a simple sprite that you can edit and save. And here you've got, when you say edit sprite, you have a line you can draw, and that line will draw around this sprite. You select a color, and when you select your color, you can then draw around it. I'm going to draw a kind of little character here, which will have a large head and kind of legs, because I'm going to make a sprite that I can move and animate. So what I need first of all is probably a sprite with a big eye, because he's got to look somewhere. And I should be able to also fill the sprite with different colors that will help us understand what's going on. I'm going to use the fill tool, and I fill it here, and now I'll give the whole body of the sprite another color. Again, I'll fill the rest of it, and so there's our first sprite. You can see here you've got the little person up there. Looks a bit odd, but that's what I wanted, and I'm going to make him run in one direction, so I need to make the legs kind of move. So if I have another one here, I could actually copy and paste this one, and I can paste him in there, and I might just get rid of that one, because it will be easier for me to delete these legs or parts of the legs, and then I will edit them. So I'm now going to just delete all of this part of the sprite. The right hand sprite, you can see that it's changing up the top there. Might have been easier to draw it, but it's up to you how you end up doing this. But essentially, this is the method. You'll need maybe 2 or 3 of these in order to have your sprite kind of move. But I just want the legs to be together and then apart, because when I animate that, it should work. If I go back and do my line tool again, I should be able to just make it have the legs together, and then I can fill it again with the fill tool. And so I have here 2 sprites. Now, what about if I make them run? You can see that you've got some animation there. Now, that's what we're doing today. Now, I'll also do another trick here. But I'll just pause it for the moment. So when you double click on the sprite that you've made, it comes up with this particular panel here. Now, if you press the play button, you can see the legs moving, but they're moving very, very quickly because it's going at a speed of 15 frames per second. I'm going to drop that down to about 8 frames per second, and you can see that it's moving a little more slowly there. So what I'm going to do then is to be able to add that sprite to the room, and I'll show you how to do that too. So open up the room, and in order to add the sprite to the room, you need to make the sprite into an object. And again, I'm going to select my sprite for this. I'm going to call it my player object. And I'm simply going to save that like that. Now, when I go back to my room and double click on my room, I can bring my sprite into the room by clicking instances up the top. If you notice there, I clicked instances, and there's the person in the room. Now, nothing much will happen here if I played the game, but of course I need to save everything I've done. And if I do play the game, it will come up and it will look a little bit like this. And I hope this comes up and you can see this before I end this tutorial. It takes a while to load up the game, and it came on a different screen, but you can see here that my little person is kind of running along, and that's simple and all I really wanted today. So I'm going to leave that now there, and I'll leave you. I'll come back to you, but I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now. So we were here looking at the room with our little object sprite there, and while it runs in spot, it doesn't move. We're going to move it around by using the arrow keys, and you would be familiar with using arrow keys in games to move objects. We're going to double click on our little player, and when we double click on the player, it comes up with this code window. Now you can see it's called Sprite 1 because it's a sprite, but its object name is player 1. We're going to add an event, and mostly you will only add events. We need to make it solid in case it collides with other objects, which will happen later. Well, the first event we're going to add is the create event. That just allows the code to start. We're then going to add an event to move it, and we're going to use the arrow keys. We're going to use a key down event, and if we go and make a key down event for the key down right, now key down right should move it across the screen to the right. Now what that means is that we need to move it across the screen, and when we look at our room, you can think of the room as a kind of grid, like a graph grid. And the top left corner is called 0, 0. The pixel number is 0, 0. So to move to the right, we have to add 5 to make it fairly smooth. That will jump at 5 pixels when we put the key down. And we want it to keep moving to the right as well. So I need to get to the code. Now the code section or the code objects are over there, and you can see them. But in order to get them visible, it's hard to move these things around. Now there's 2 ways to do it. But the first way I would recommend you use is to use a mouse. And I press down the middle key of the mouse, and I then can drag this whole thing across to the left. Now that's one way to do it, but on your small screens, you'll find that you might have to try and minimize it a little bit. You can do that by going Control minus, and that will zoom out, and Control plus will zoom back in. We're going to add a movement which is called jump to position. And so you can see all of these programming objects here. We want to find the one that says movement, and you can see that here. We're going to go jump to point. So we're going to drag that on here, jump to point, and we're going to move it 5 pixels to the right relative to where it is now. But on the y-axis, up and down, it's not going anywhere. The right arrow merely moves it to the right. So then, once we've done that, we then want to add another object over here. Now we've got jump that way for the key down right. So we need another event. We need a key down left. And key down left, again, we'll use this jump to point. And you'll find it'll appear in this recently used section up the top now that you've used it. So we're going to go -5 pixels relative to where it is, and we'll put 0 for y and make that relative as well. Now, at this point, I think I'll save this and we'll check it working. When you save, you press that button, Save Project. It's important you do that. It's also important you know where you're saving your projects to. And it says we want to save everything. So we're doing that. And now I'm going to press the play button. The play or run button is up there. It's also F5 if you wanted to use your keyboard. So I'm pressing the F5 button. On my screen, this game will probably start over to the left, and I'll drag it into the screen so you can see it. The game is now loading, and it takes a while for the game to load. That's because it's doing what we call compiling. It's compiling all of our code into noughts and ones, really, so the computer can understand it and run it on the screen. That's what compiling means. And when you're writing programming, you're compiling when you run things. So there's my right arrow key, there's my left. Now, at the moment, he's not turning anywhere, and the Y axis isn't working, of course. The problem here is, of course, he can leave the screen, which we'll fix later on, but obviously that's working for the moment. So now I need to add the event for up and down arrows, so key down up. Now the key down up will be the y-axis, so the x is 0, and the y to go back to 0 will be -5. And when we want the key down, we want it to get more y value in pixels. So we add a key down command here. And for that one, we again are using a jump to point, and we'll put 0 for the x, 5 for the y, save it, and we'll compile and run it again. It does take a little bit of time, depending how fast your computer is. Here it is again. So I'm moving with the right arrow, the left arrow, the up arrow, the down arrow. So we have our movement at this stage. And that's where we're getting to in this tutorial. I'll see you again next time. The next thing we need to do is to flip our little person around so that they're moving, well, they look like they're moving in the direction they're moving to. So that all happens on what I referred to as the x-axis. And so that means the right and the left arrows. So when it's turning when it goes left, we want it to turn and face the other direction. Now, what we do for that is that we use the tool called Set Instance Scale. Now, that's it here, Set Instance Scale. So we simply drag that under the other programming object, and we're making it horizontally in the negative direction. And we'll see that that will make it face left. Now, when we're doing the right instance here, if you double click on the right key and bring that object in. Now, again, it should appear up to the top in our recently used now. We pop that there. We just want it to be 1 and 1. We don't want it to be like the left one where it is -1 and vertical 1. So what we're doing there is you could put it upside down, of course, by doing it vertical, I guess, but let's save that and we'll have a look at that on the screen. So again, I'm going to compile it. While it's compiling, I might have to wait because I've got the kind of wait signal. I will show you what happens with the room editor when it disappears, and you might want to make it disappear so that you can see a full screen later on. I'll get there in a moment. So if I bring the little person over here, now I'm going the left arrow, you can see now it's going facing the other direction as it walks around. So, and it can go up and across and flip backwards and forwards, which was the main aim of that process. Now the room editor might disappear. If you click that, it should disappear. And now you can see your full workspace. Now that's useful to some extent, but it might not be useful if you want to find your instances again, which is what you need to click to have a look at the room. You can't find the tool that opens that room editor up here. The reason for that is you need to double click here on the room. Now, once you double click on the room, you'll see a new tab up here called Room. And if we look at Room Properties and double click that, now you can see your room setting again and the room editor.